Did you see the look on that guy's face when I put the gun in his mouth? He was shitting himself. The weasel-faced man laughed obnoxiously. The man with the beer gut sitting next to him laughed too. He said, "Yeah, and when he started crying after we took his daughters, I almost couldn't keep it up." He tilted back the bottle of whiskey in his hand and guzzled it greedily. The weasel-faced man slapped his shoulder, making him spill it down his chest. "Damn it! Look what you made me do!" Beer Gut smacked him in the back of the head. Weaselface rubbed his head and said, "Well, quit hogging it." He snatched it out of Beer Gut's hand, causing more to spill out before he tilted it up and guzzled it himself. Reaper watched all this from the darkness of the brush, just beyond their campfire. However, the babbling of the two idiots was only periphery, as his gaze was locked on the third hooded man sitting at the fire directly opposite where he stood. He didn't engage with the other two. He sat silently brooding, staring into the fire and slowly sipping from his own bottle of whiskey. Without taking his eyes off the fire, he said, "You two, shut the fuck up." Weaselface said, "Hey, what bug crawled up your butt?" Beer Gut chuckled. "He's just pissed he didn't get a turn with them young twats." Broody stopped drinking and set the bottle on the ground. He pulled back his hood and glared at the other two. Weaselface gulped. Beer Gut's face went pale. He said, "Just kidding, Rave. Sorry, man. We'll keep it down." Broody pulled the hood back on, picked up his bottle, and continued drinking. Reaper's heart pounded in his ears when the man took his hood down. Seeing the raven tattoo with the satanic symbol beneath it sent him back 2 years to when he had first seen it. It was the day he had been born, the day the man he used to be ceased to exist, the day everything changed, for him and the whole world. Reaper had been searching for this man for the better part of those 2 years. Now here he sat, a few feet away. Fate had finally saw fit to place this man into his hands, and he would relish this. He quietly pulled a knife from his belt with one hand and a hatchet with the other. The hatchet caught on his belt, making a soft tink sound. Reaper paused, silently cursing himself. He'd been on the trail of these three for 2 days, had tracked down countless leads, traversed an unending world of human suffering and depravity for 2 years, all in relentless pursuit of this one man. He breathed softly. Now that the moment was here, he didn't want to ruin it by being hasty. He watched the three. Of course they hadn't heard, and were going about their business without the slightest idea death was so near to them. Reaper studied each man's position and sized up his distances. Beer Gut threw his head back to finish off the last of the whiskey. Reaper moved his hand with a practiced movement, and his knife flew into Beer Gut's throat. It pierced the Adam's apple dead center just as it moved down from the last swallow. Weaselface's eyes grew big and he sputtered. Before he could get a word out, Reaper's hatchet buried itself into his forehead. He and Beer Gut fell to the ground. Broody threw back his hood and yelled, "I told you two to shut the—" He paused mid-sentence, seeing his dead companions bleeding on the ground. He shot up and looked around. Reaper stood behind him. He said, "Hey." Broody whirled around. Reaper bashed him in the temple with the butt of his pistol. He crumpled to the ground. Reaper surveyed his work. He walked over and searched the dead men, pocketing a revolver, a decent knife, 2 lighters, and a handful of rounds. He left Beer Gut's sawed-off shotgun behind, although he did empty the chamber of the shells. He left them where they lay. He had learned in this fallen world the dead bodies were more common than graves, and that the latter would often tip off passers-by that you had been there. He wouldn't have wasted the effort on these two anyway. Let the wild have them. The man at his feet, however, would live for a bit longer. Reaper had many delightful and terrible things planned for him. How many of those things he got to experience would depend on him. Reaper retrieved the length of rope, tied the man's wrists behind his back. He tied a separate piece around his ankles. Then he found a long, sturdy stick, tied one end into the rope around his wrist, and the other end into the rope around his ankles. He reached down and hefted the man across his shoulders. He had about a 2-mile trek to get to his ATV, then a drive of many more miles to get back to his lair. His muscles flexed with anticipation. The moment he obsessed about for 2 years was so close now. He would interrogate this man and make him tell him where his daughter was.